Today we learn more about text animation. So far we have worked with text tool. By selecting text tool, clicking in our viewport and typing something, we can create any sort of text. As soon as you create a text, you have a text layer in your layer panel. You can change the format of your text using character panel in the right side. So for example, if I select my text, go to character panel, I can change the typeface and I can change the size of my text. If I have several lines, I can change the space between the lines. Just make sure that you are selecting all of your text or the text layer. You can change the space between the letters, stretch them or squash them, and etc. We also have paragraph panel that allows us to align our paragraph. Now, if we go back to our text layer and expand the layer, we can see that we have a text properties. And by expanding these properties, we access the first property is called source text. This is a very useful properties when you want to change your text or its format and animate that. So for example, if I create a keyframe and then move my time slider ahead, and then I change, let's for example say my text start with just one word. So that would be my first keyframe. I'm gonna copy that and replace it with the first keyframe. And then I move my time slider ahead and add to my text. Another keyframe is automatically created. Then I move my time slider and add more. Now I have this animation. And I can kind of change the speed of the animation by changing the space between the keyframes. It looks like this. Let's take a quick look at the keyframes that we have here. The keyframe looks like toggle hold keyframes. So there is no transition, a smooth transition between two keyframes. You just jump from one animation to the next change. And if I click on my speed graph, there is no speed graph here. So this is what we have when we are animating source text. We just have this kind of keyframes, but still we can get really interesting result. So for example, I have this and I can go even further in my timeline and select the whole thing and change the typeface. Even if I change my typeface, a keyframe is going to record that change. So let's see what we have. Okay, the next option in text properties is path option. Path option is when you create a path and then you attach your text to that path so you can animate the text based on the shape of your path. The first thing you need to do is to create a path. So I can just go to my shape tool. Make sure that I'm selecting the layer because I'm creating a path that is a mask. And just create, for example, a circle. I see the mask option added to my text layer. And if your mask is a closed path like this circle, you just need to change the mask to none. And then go back to path option. And from the menu, if you click now, you have the mask. And as soon as you choose the mask, your text snaps to the mask. And you have more options now. So for example, reverse path. The second one, perpend, it kind of changed how your text looks like on the mask, the first three options. And the last two ones, you can guess that they help you to animate the text. So for example, if I create a keyframe here and then move ahead, I would have an animation like this. And then if you want to create another form of mask, for example, just a line, I select my text layer and I create a path like this. Okay, right now the path is very kind of invisible. You see this little box, color box beside your mask. You can change the color of your mask path so you can see it better. And for example, if I want to edit it. So now I have a mask path. And because it's not closed, I don't need to change from add to none. I just have the mask. I go to my path option and just add the mask to my text. And as soon as I do that, my text snap to the path. And now I can kind of bring the text outside of the frame, create a keyframe in the beginning of my composition, my timeline, and then go to the last frame and kind of make the text go outside. The next option in text properties that is very useful is animate. If you click on this menu, you find a lot of properties that you can add to your text properties and animate them. And today we are going to work with a few of them, starting with a scale. So when you add a properties from animate to your text, you see animator 1 option added to your text properties. Inside animator 1 options, you have range selector and a scale. Inside the range selector, you have start, end, and offset options that relate to your scale animation. We also have advanced. We are going to work with that in a few seconds. But just let's start with creating a simple scale animation here. So if I create a keyframe and put my scale on 0 and then go ahead and change that to 100, so I would have an animation like this. Each letters start scaling up from 0 to 100. And if I look at my text in the viewport, after adding the scale, I see each letter has a little red dot, which means that the scale animation is happening based on each letter. If I want to change that, I can go back to more options and change whatever animation and whatever properties that you give to your text apply to each letter, each word, or if you have even a line, to the whole line. So for example, now that I change to each word, my animation happens, the scale animation happens for each word rather than each letter. Okay, I'm gonna go back to character, which means the animation is based on each letter. And okay, so here I can change the scale animation and get this result, or I just can delete the keyframe for scale, put the scale on 0, and animate the offset. If I change the offset from 0 to 100, I would have an animation like this. Kind of different with the previous one. It might be more interesting. Here we have also advanced that gives us more option to edit our animation. So for example, right now my animation is start from 0, a scale and a scale up to 100. If I change the mode to subtract, I would have basically starting the scale from 100 and then going to 0. Another important thing is that I can have more than one animator inside my text properties, so I can apply multiple properties, or I just can duplicate this by pressing Command D and then moving the keyframes that I already created. So this is basically the same animation. I just offset the keyframes, and in the new one, I just change the mode from add to subtract. I would have an animation like this, starting scale up and then a scale down. Okay, let's try another properties to animate our text. For example, position. Okay, right now I don't have anything. Let's animate the position. So starting from, for example, here and moving up to 0. So I would have a simple position animation here. Now I have to go back to range selector and animate the offset from 0 to 100. Now if I play my animation, I would have something like that. Let's look at the advanced option one more time. So the first option is units. So you can see your range selector based on index numbers or percentage, whichever is easier for you. You can animate again based on letters or, for example, words. So the movement, the properties that you apply is whether affecting your letters or your whole word. And you have again subtract and adding options, which gives you different forms of animation. And you have shape. So the shape is an interesting one because it gives you different forms of position animation. For example, right now we have a square and then we can choose ramp up. Something about the ramp up and other shapes of animation that you have here is that they need to start, the offset needs to start from -100. Let's try the other ones, give you different forms of position animation. And you have this for all of those properties that you're adding. Scale, rotation, etc. Can, change them and see for each option you have what form of animation you get. And then you have ease high and ease low, which is affecting your easing. Let's work with two more properties for text animation. One is tracking and the other one is blur. So I add tracking to my text. And what tracking do is it creates a space between the letters of your text. Create an animation, my text is expanded, and then in maybe 20 frame, it goes back to its normal spacing. I can easy ease my keyframe just to have a smoother animation. And now I want to add some blur to this. One thing that I can do is add the blur to the same animator that I add. So instead of going to animate, I go to add, and from properties, I add blur, creating a keyframe. And I offset the keyframes just to have a little bit of delay. We have even more freedom if we convert our text to a shape and then to animate each letter separately, like this animation. To create an animation like this, the first thing I do, I right click in my text, go to create and choose create shapes from text. Now I have a shape layer of my text, and in the content I have each letter created separately. I can delete my text layer because I don't need that. If you expand each letter, you see that now you have a path option that allows you to animate that, and your text is turned to a shape that has an editable path. The first thing I want to do to create the animation is to create a simple position animation. It's a bit jumpy, so I'm gonna ease this keyframe. Now I want to animate each of these I letters so they have their own separate animation. What I do is I go to content and find each of these letters. For example, in I, separate, the dot has a separate path than the I itself. I choose the whole I and expand these two options and create keyframe for both. So right now I recorded this position, and then here I'm gonna select. Can be a little bit annoying when you are selecting the vertex. Just if you by accident came out and you cannot select, you are selecting the whole thing, just go back to your letter and click on the path so the vertex appears, and then select whatever vertex you want to animate. So I want to move this up here, and then at the end of the animation I want them to go back to their first position. I'm gonna copy paste the first keyframe. Now my animation looks like this. And just simply by offsetting the dot keyframe, I would have a little bit of follow through. I do the same thing for the second I.